Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, and I'm your host, Adrian Danila. Today, I have a very special guest right here with me, Virginia Love. Welcome to the show, Virginia.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Virginia, just to say at the very beginning that you're a industry principal with Entrada. Just to say that to the very few audience that don't know you yet. And I'd like to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about how you have started in apartment industry and how did you land at Entrada?
Yeah. My journey was much like a lot of folks that are in the industry. Is I started off on site. I started off as a part-time leasing consultant with Trammell Crow Residential Services, TCRS, a million years ago. It'll be 32 years this fall. I followed a friend of mine, Greg Toomey, who started as a lease consultant. We met a gentleman in our other lot before our property management life, and he's like, "Y'all ought to be leasing apartments. You know, you've got a lot of enthusiasm and you're fun. You'll like it." So Greg went first, and then I followed him as leasing. And then, like a lot of folks on site, you have to work your way up, right? And you go from being a great leasing consultant, and the only way that you can get to be an assistant manager or regional manager is you have to be, you have to perform. So you take somebody out of that sales role that they're so good at, and in the industry, you put them behind a desk a lot of times. That's what sort of the assistant manager did back in my day. I was blessed that I moved a couple companies. I ended up working with Summit, which is now Camden, a private owner and developer here in Atlanta. Then I landed at ING Clarion with Greg Lozenak as I was the training and marketing director. Then I was VP. And then we left that company and went together to Waterton. I was at Waterton for 12 years as vice president of leasing and marketing. So I kind of did what everybody else has done. I worked my way through. And what I love about this industry is like you can pick something that you really like. Like if you like the accounting part, there's an outlet for you, if you want to work your way up in a company. If you love the marketing part, the training part, the business development part, you can sort of identify what it is that you're good at and move that way. And I was a client of Entrada for 8.5 years. We were an early adopter back in the property solutions days. And I always identified with the brand. I was a big proponent of what they were doing because they were doing something different. Ours is an industry that we don't particularly like change. And then when we do think we're going to change, we still want to do it the old way. So we acknowledged early on that, this group is trying to do something different and we wanted to be a part of it. And that relationship, it was Chase Harrington, our president, who said to me, "Hey, I've got this great idea. I think you should come over to Entrada and we'll create a role where you sort of bridge between marketing and sales and product, and you bring people, bring ideas in from the industry, and you'll help clients, and you'll do a lot of speaking, and, sort of answer 1,000 questions a day that the developers might not understand about the industry. They know technology." And it took 3 years, almost 3 years to the day, for us to put this together. And I say all the time, best decision I ever made. Best decision I've ever made. It's been great.
So you're saying something that's incredibly important to me, right? You describe your journey to joining Entrada. And I always ask my guests, this is not something that we priorly discussed, but I really wanted to ask you this question, right? Sure. Do you think there's any value for a company in chasing and finding industry influencers that, there's a compatibility between those personalities and the products that they're trying to sell, and, getting together and just joining forces and helping them push their products, helping them get out there, relationships, everything that comes with it? Do you think there's any value in hiring industry influencers?
100%, 100%. One of my first days at Entrada, I went out to Utah for the new hire training, and Chase called me upstairs. He's like, can you go step into this meeting with a bunch of the engineers and folks from R&D and product? He was on a call. Can you go? I know you can help them. I was like, sure. I mean, I had been on the clock for like an hour, right? And so I get upstairs and they had a question. And we've all been on calls on demos with new companies, and they say something, or all you have to do is the site levels just have to push this out. And you're like, it's not going to happen. Like, they don't know the workflow. So they're building something that as soon as they pitch it, folks like me in my old life kind of shut it down. We're like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't how the business works. Now, you can make the business work a different way, but you got to understand how it's working now. And I got upstairs to this meeting, and what they were having trouble with was a rentable item in the system. And they were like, well, why does this client say it's a rentable item, but this client isn't? What they were doing is they were tracking the support tickets. We had made a change, and at the update, when the software updated, and some people loved the change and some people didn't like the change in the system. And so I was like, well, can you show it to me? So they pull it up and I look at it. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So why don't you do it like a drop-down menu instead of 2 fields, whatever the thing was? And literally they gave me a standing ovation. And what I learned there, I came back up and Chase was like, best hire ever, is that I can answer questions really quickly because I've been there and I can think like the client thinks, right? And I also know that no 2 companies are doing this the same. Like, what's an rentable item at this company they may already have that factored in the rent at another company. So to be able to be on the front end, whether we're developing a product or solving a solution, or even getting on the phone with a client and going, tell me what the problem is. What are you having trouble doing? Let me see if I can help you vet that out. It's been great. And I do think, I mean, not any credit of mine, 100%, it's all Chase's credit. It was very much in the forefront to think about going, okay, let's bring somebody in that knows it better than we do, those daily activities better than they do. And again, I've loved it. And I've seen other companies hire folks now, and I think it's awesome. I think it's great.
You're making an excellent point, right? You have been the client for your entire career prior to
28 years. Yeah.
And now you're switching, you were working on a service provider side, and you give them that insight that, they can't really have on their own. It doesn't matter how hard they work, because they haven't been in your shoes ever.
Yeah. They'll never find it out. Like you would stumble across it, and maybe another client or another customer would mention it to you, but it would be hard. They just don't, they've never done the job. There's a little bit of benefit in actually being on and doing the job. I have such great respect for the teams on site. I think the last couple of years have really put the focus back on them, which I think is fantastic. And I think that, that's such a big, important thing to us at Entrada, is that the end user is able to get their job done. And so if I can help that on the software side, I think that's what I want to do.
I love that you mentioned the end user, because basically you anticipated my next question.
Oh, good.
And the next question is actually, again, not related to what we priorly discussed preparing the show, but it's actually, what's the importance of the end user in a process of vetting out a prop tech product? And then how does your company approach? How do you focus on an end user outside of just the high level sales pitch, right? Where you're talking to a CEO, president of a company, VP of operation trying to sell. What's the piece that, Entrada brings in that actually it's focused on the end user and not on a high level sale? I'm really curious about how, what's the strategy there?
It's such a good question, because you do find that folks look, you want to get to the person that's signing the contract, right? That's the ultimate goal. Yes. I say all the time, there was that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the mother says, the husband's the head of the household, but the woman's the neck, the wife is the neck, the site level's the neck, right? While they don't necessarily sign contracts, and that whole signing of a contract happens at 1,000 different levels in this industry. Some regionals have ability, some don't. Some managers have ability, some don't. So you can't even pull all that into one category. but the sites have such an influence on what's happening. And I say all the time at Entrada, is like, if we're making it hard for them to do their job, if it's hard to lease an apartment, it's hard to lease an apartment. If we make it difficult and they start saying we can't, it won't, this doesn't work, or the most important thing that we do as an industry is get money in the bank. If anything that we're doing is preventing them from getting money in the bank, and that's basically anything that we do, right? I mean, it's deposits, applications, rents, utilities, it's renewals, it's referrals, everything is putting money in the bank. So if we can't make that good for them, then they'll pipe up. And we hope they do. You know, they're the ones that make us better, the end user. What I also think is really interesting is, you know, this is a B2B, B2C situation. We have a user, and then our user has a user. So software, everybody touches. It's not just the accountants. It's not just the leasing teams or the managers or somebody pulling a report. It's your residents. It's other third-party providers that you want to integrate with. It is your prospects. Everybody is looking at it. So we're trying to make it easy to lease an apartment, whether you are the customer leasing the apartment or you're our customer who's doing the leasing of the apartment. That is what I think makes Entrada completely different, is just that approach. We know that those folks writing the checks and signing the contracts, good. We know how important they are. But what's been really great, like I said before about the site level teams, we were living in a time where they were kind of doing push down tech, where the corporate office was saying, this is what you're going to use. And just, you know, I did it. I mean, I was the worst at it. I was like, oh my God, I found something bright and shiny. I want to use it. You know, you go to a conference, you sign up for a bunch of stuff and you sign it all, you push it out on the site and nothing ever happens. Right. And then, because they have too much stuff going on. But now we're from that push down tech to sort of a user input environment, to where so many customers of ours and others in the industry have formed sort of some groups using their site level teams to say, hey, you tell us, where are the gaps, where are the holes, how can we improve this process, how can we make your job easier? And it's been a long time coming, and I know everybody that's on the site is just being, you know, they're being heard, and they want to be able to do their job, but they want to have efficiencies. They want to make it easy on their customer. And that's what we're here to do. That's the problem we're trying to solve for.
I'm super excited about two things that you just said, right? Getting the buy-in from the end user.
Yes.
You acknowledge, your company understands that without the buy-in and without making something that they would like, they would enjoy using, you know, you're not going to be successful ultimately, no matter how many high-level sales you make. And
Nope.
then the focus on creating a frictionless process, right? In other words, like you said, I don't want to be a bump in a road to be on their way of taking the money to the bank.
That's right.
How can I make it like so smooth that there's no barriers? Like, I'm just going to remove all the barriers and they get the money, and the money is in a bank the next second.
Money's in the bank. Well, and you know, the thing about that is so interesting is, even back when I was an operator, we wanted to be paperless, right? We had LEED certified buildings. We had all these great programs for sustainability, but then you had folks that just held on to it, but we have to get their pay stub. You know, you get somebody to see an apartment, you're doing all that paperless, you get rid of brochures, you're doing all your follow-up electronically, and then they come out and see the apartment, and you're using an iPad to do the tour. You're having them fill out the application on the iPad. They're paying electronically, and then it gets down to the approval process. And that's the one where if you've ever been burned before, you know, with somebody lying about their job or how much they get paid, that's one of those things I'm like, you know, and I do this now. I'm like, you can't have a contactless, paperless, seamless process and ask somebody to give you a piece of paper, ask the site team to scan it and attach it to their digital file. It'll never happen. They're so busy. It'll never, ever happen. So a lot of it, what you and I are both talking about, is about, you know, you gotta just kind of bite the bullet and get rid of some of those old processes and stop managing to what could go wrong and manage to what's going right. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My next question to you, Virginia, is now that you're on the other side, right, on the bright side,
Yeah.
what it's called, what do you know that you didn't know prior to joining Entrada?
I laugh all the time. People, when I join and try, they're like, oh my gosh, you went to the dark side. I'm like, it's not that dark over here. I've not had a dead body in an apartment. I've not had a tree in a car.
No
I haven't had a
skeletons in
dog.
a closet.
Yeah, I have no skeletons in the closet. It's not that dark. Trust me. You go work where people live, you'll see some stuff. One of the things I was super guilty about was but wanting them to add things to the system that I just thought were like, you just add a field. I want to be able to track how many people pull into the property in a red car, whatever it is. Just add a field so I can put it on the guest card. Now what I know is how much that additional field changes on the back end. It changes in reporting for everybody. And then you have to factor that new field into every report that may include it. So now I have a far more deeper understanding of how how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? And I was the one just I was a difficult customer, which makes me probably I was one of the Chase always says I was one of the two more difficult customers, and he's hired the other one too, Steph Furman. So he's like, I did the smart thing and brought you both over. But what I loved about finding out about some of this stuff about, what I think I was guilty of and what I did not know prior to joining an Entrada is that every company everybody is sort of doing things overwhelmingly the same. It's just what you call them or your process that you're doing them. But it all goes back to the people. It all goes back to the people on site and how the value that they bring, not just training them on doing things one time, which is something I was guilty of, but continually training, it's a really hard industry to where if you start working with me and I train you on something, and then I'm counting on you to teach everybody else that comes to the site, right? And then if you move jobs, very rarely do we start that over. It's just I'll let them know, then they'll go teach everybody else. And it just doesn't, there's so many teachable moments in the industry. You just don't have time for them all. But these companies that have a training program that is steady, that they're doing not only rolling things out and implementing them, but then also have refresher training. They're checking their reports, what's going well, what's not going well, maybe doing a training on that and looking at the strengths and the weaknesses that the teams have. They fare, a lot better. The other thing that I learned is that, and this was an early meeting I went into with Chase, where we had a client that was kind of mad. I'll tell you, they were mad because one of the reports weren't adding up. And one of the factors that they were reporting, I think it was move-ins or leases. That's what it was. It was leases. And there were 5 of them. And me, Chase, and Chase finally said, let me ask y'all a question. Get out a piece of paper and get a pen. Don't look at each other's work. We were having a debate about things. And he said, I want you to cover, don't let anybody see what you're saying. And I'm going to ask you a question. When is it a move-in? When is it a lease? When is it a lease? And 5 folks, 4 answers. So a lot of times within the company, and again, I was guilty of this now that I look back. We don't all settle on those terms and those key performance indicators internally. So everybody's looking at a report and coming up with what it says differently. And this was a great meeting. We were at a breakfast and they were all like, what do you mean? It's a lease when they sign the lease. No, it's not. It's when they sign the application. No, it's not. It's not until they move in and pay rent. So they were all debating it. And Chase just kind of said, y'all tell us when it's going to be a lease. What y'all determine is the lease. And that will be what it is. But y'all have got to figure that out first. I see that a lot. And sometimes it's something as simple as, what again, like what one person is thinking something one step is and another person their definition. But I see it so prominently now because I was so guilty of it. I did the same dadgum thing, right? I would think that I knew what I was measuring and somebody else was not looking at that report the same. So a lot of it's just about having those open conversations and, take a little time with the folks within your company and let's sit down and determine this is the This is the report we're going to look at for move-ins. This is the one we're going to look at for skips. This is the column we're going to look at for new leases. And this is the one we're going to look at for commissions. Make a determination, because it could really fix a lot of confusion.
I think this was a brilliant move, right?
Okay.
Just to realize that we're not talking to one group here.
That's right.
But we're talking to a number of tribes, and each tribe is kind of trying to have it their way.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not going to be able to please them all.
No.
It's going to have to be a compromise, like a compromise internal for them. Compromise. Right. Just say, this is what we want. Like, not, this is the 5 things that we want.
That's
different
right.
That a lot of the times, they're conflicting. Yeah.
What we deem important, these are the key performance indicators that we're going to look at. And again, in my old position, I'm looking at one set of reports because I'm looking at the top of the funnel as a marketer, and then somebody else is looking at the property management software, the back end, as an accounting person. I'm like, well, wait, that number doesn't matter unless this number is right. You're right. This is where the data is coming in. So this is where it's at its cleanest. Then we start, sending it down the funnel. It's getting muddier and muddier. So that was something that, and when the market is good, I'll say this, we've had some high times, right? We've been doing really well. It's getting a little soft out there. It's not going to be like 2008, but when things get softer, folks start taking a hard look at stuff. I always say we forgive a multitude of sins on, in performance when we're going well, because we're like, it's clicking. You don't want to mess up that groove on site. But now we'll get back to the point where everybody's kind of digging into those reports a little bit harder. And I think we're going to see this come up.
Yeah. And I think this year is going to be extremely challenging for everybody. Yes. But I'll say especially for prop tech companies, because COVID has made us think that, okay, I guess for the most part, prop tech is going to be the solution for everything, even though it wasn't. And now everybody's reevaluating. So there were a lot of money put into building new product to help with the lack of one-on-one interaction. And now that, we're back to, meeting in person and everything, they're looking at, like you said, they're reevaluating, right? They're looking at, economies, things are going soft, interest rates are high. We can't just buy as much as we did. Our deals are getting tighter. So, where are we cutting? It's payroll is going to be, all the expenses, everything's being scrutinized. So I think it's going to be an extremely, extremely challenging year, especially for prop tech. Don't you think so?
I do. I think so too. And I think there's a lot of money out there in prop tech, and I love new ideas, and I'm a big fan of innovation. And I love something new coming to the market that even competes with something that we have. It makes us better. And something pops up every day, but you're right. A lot of it has to do with how much more can the site level have on them, like I said before, is it going to be a product that's going to require something of them? Like, all they have to do is tell the prospect to do this, and then the prospect goes to this, and then the leasing person has to send us. I'm like, it's already dead in the water. They don't have time. They have a lot of responsibility of their own. They have to sell their property, show the property, take care of the residents, do their social media. I mean, it is a lot. And these are, we had one deal at Waterton that was $555 million. So $555 million deal, presidential towers. We put like $55 million into it in a rehab, and the leasing folks in that office worked. I can't even begin to tell you. I don't know how I would go visit the property and I would be exhausted by lunch. The pace that they had on that type of property. So to add something to that property, or even to add something for someone who's got 200 units in a rural suburban market, it's a lot of pressure on them. The other thing that I will say about what you mentioned about prop tech is, I think one of the things that we see is kind of who I was the one that wanted to buy all the shiny new penny stuff. Like, I go to a conference, I'd come back, I'm like, we have to have it all, marketing, and my old boss, Greg Lozenat, used to tell me, you're a Rottweiler. I'm just holding the leash. He's like, you go find everything we need and I'll be the one that rein you in. It's like, nothing is more important right now. As things are getting a little bit tighter, as your teams have a lot more on them, As people think that there's a ton of tech out there that's going to do a lot of these mundane tasks, but your teams still have to manage it, right? You have to make sure these automated messages or bots, or they're answering the right questions. They have the right answer. There's still people behind all of this. But what I think is so important is to take a look at that workflow of your workflow and see where you're doing duplicate, where do you have two products that do the same thing? I did this with one of our clients when I first got to Entrada, and they were like, okay, listen, we love to say yes. We're a big yes company. We want to do it. We want to be on the forefront of all this new stuff. And I helped them, and I sat down. I was like, well, you've got 4 companies doing self-guided tours. Just pick, I don't care which one it is, pick one and do it great, right? Do it very well, advertise it, have signs, let your residents know that their friends can take a tour after hours, market the hell out of it. But right now you have 4 and they're not doing any of them because the site's like, do we still use that? Are we still using that? Are we supposed to do it that way or this way? So, sometimes the only way you'll figure that out is if you go and look at your GL codes and see who all you're paying, because all these bills get paid automatically. But that's been something that I've seen, more times than not. And now's the time, like you said, money's tight. We're going to be looking at budgets really hard. There's very little controllable expenses in our industry now. I mean, you used to control so much. Tech is one of the ones that people feel like they control. Marketing is another one they feel like they can control, but insurance, workman's comp, salaries, all the things, the taxes, all that kind of stuff, water, utilities alone, everybody's gonna be looking for every penny.
With that being said, Virginia, what do you think will be the most important thing for a PropTech company to bring to the table to make them a valuable partner for the management companies in 2023? What would make a management company say, I want to partner with this PropTech company because I feel like I'm getting value, right? What would make them stand out against everybody else that's out there in a crowd, trying to get a business or maintain the current business? What do you think are a thing or two that will really make a proper tech company?
That's a great question. It's a great question because I see products come and go, and I see even before I was at Entrada, and I see things are like, who said that? I mean, that's not that big of a problem, but know the problems that are out there and what you're trying to solve for. That sounds really easy, but that means you're going to have to do a lot of time. You're going to have to know the property types. You're going to have to know the property classes. You're going to have to understand how people staff. You're going to have to understand how people train. So it's not just, oh my gosh, I hear there's a problem with labor, so we're going to do a virtual assistant, a chatbot, whatever, and that'll fix it. No, you've got to answer the question behind all of that of what do you want? What is the role you want this bot or this new piece of automation to do for you? And have a really good understanding there. At Entrada, we don't think, and everybody's talking about centralization, or a lot of times it's more like consolidating roles. And what I think is great about this is that it kind of elevates the site level folks. There's folks on site that are so good at sales that they don't want to be the assistant manager. When I left leasing to become assistant manager, I made less money, right? Because you don't have the commissions that you used to have. We see centralization as a process. We have a flexible system. They're able to do that within the system. It's not a separate product, but I'm seeing some products that are being introduced that are just on those buzzwords. So, which is great, no, not a problem, but they're just answering the buzzword. But then you start looking at it, you go, okay, no 2 companies want to do centralization the same. It doesn't have a single definition. We see some that are like, we're going to send all the calls to us, and then we're going to figure out which one works best. We're going to send it out to the site. Great. Then we have other ones. No, we're going to send all the calls to you. You're going to put all the calls together, put them in the CRM. We're going to have people go into the CRM, start talking to people, and then send them out. Great. We have one client that's not even doing any in-person tours. It's only doing virtual tours. They're bringing all the calls in, scheduling, sending out their salespeople to do the virtual tours. All of these are great, smart solutions, but none of them are the same. So you've got to understand that backside of it before you come in and go, this is how it works, or even build it and say, this is what it does, because I'm the one back in my former life that goes, well, that's not how it works. That's not the flow. That's not the workflow. That's not how the customer journey. That's not how our associates, their workflow is. So a little bit more research would do them all a lot of good going into 2023 and 24.
I'll go a step further and also 2 steps back to what I just asked you prior, right? And the quickest way to get that type of knowledge, the type of insight, is to hire someone that's already doing it.
That's right.
No.
Or a consultant. There's a lot of consultants out there. That's a great investment too, right?
Yes. Yes. I'm very well aware because, I had conversations, especially like a couple of months ago, a month ago or so, when I got laid off. I got companies reaching out to me, and, they wanted to have conversations with me about how they could build their products to,
right,
to better serve the end users. You're absolutely right. I think that's a investment very worthy for a company that wants to have an edge over competition.
I will say, and I have this later to talk about, but I think it's in some very implies now, because you and I were talking before we started recording. You and I are very, very similar, that we say yes a lot, right? Like I looked at every demo. I'll still look at any demo that anybody wants to bring to me. And I did it in my former life because I kind of like to be, I'm a Taurus. I want to be the one that kind of knows things before everybody else knows it. But someone told me years ago, to try to make yourself indispensable. It's a hard thing to do, right? Everybody is dispensable, but try to make yourself, and that was going to be my superpower. That I was like, I'm going to look at every demo I can get, see as many products, there were ones I'm like, I'll never use this. 2 days later, I'm trying to figure out a way to get it into the budget. I'm like, oh my gosh, had I not looked at it. But the reason why I wanted to see them is that when we would be sitting at that boardroom table with leadership at Waterton, and someone said, hey, has anybody ever seen? I could say, I have. Absolutely. This is what it does. This is what we have that we're using that for. This is what they're different. I've already spoken to the company that we use for this for, and that's on their roadmap or whatever. So it's such a and somebody told me to do it. I didn't come up with take the demo, but I say it all the daggum time because it does kind of round you out professionally. And like you said, you got laid off and within days had, 20 interviews because you keep continually putting yourself out there and folks know that they can come to you. That's what indispensable means.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing, because I think we want to tell folks the story, like your story mainly, my story as well, is that if you put yourself out there, make yourself available, there's no such a thing as a dumb conversation.
Agreed.
Yes, everything, it's an opportunity. Even if you apparently don't have any interest in getting the job, in buying the product, in becoming the customer, you should be take that meeting.
Agreed. Yeah.
Take that meeting
at any cost. You never know what tomorrow holds. You have no idea. So I could not agree with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that, we're just kind of on the same page, sharing the word out there, because I like for them to hear us. We speak loud, and we want them to hear us and embrace this, because, it makes a person better.
Yeah,
when they're switching the mindset to like accepting, being open to the conversations.
Yes, I agree. And it's good for everybody to be in. Yes.
Everybody wins. Honestly.
Yes, agreed.
Virginia, the next question is, I wanted to ask you if there's one thought or belief that you always come back to while working with those that might not be as familiar with the specifics of our industry.
Yes, the one thing that I go back with everything is that nothing happens until somebody leases an apartment. This whole business is built on somebody leasing an apartment. The site level teams are the only ones generating income. Everybody else is an expense, your support or your product of support. But until somebody leases an apartment, you really don't have there's nothing. That's the basis of the entire business. And like I said before, all this tech is great. There's got to be people managing the tech. I see automated responses. I shop a lot of properties online just to see what the workflows of what, people are doing, and trying to look at best practices. And just the other day I did one. It wasn't one of our customers, but I'm sure we have them that do that, that said, happy holidays and we look forward to seeing you, like that's an automated response, but you got to change it. You got to happy holiday, which maybe it's Easter or St. Patrick's Day, but that kind of thing, like there's very little set it and forget it in this industry. But I think the biggest one is that site team. Again, I keep saying that I'm a huge fan. The weight of their job is not lost on me. I did it. I did it back in the day when we had paper guest cards and we had ledger cards, but that's the most important thing. That lease on the front end is paying for everybody in their company. It's paying for everybody in my company. We are all counting on that. So if we're not catering to that role, you're making a mistake.
I want to pick up on something very important that you just said. Nothing happens until you lease an apartment, and everything else it's an expense.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest challenge that I had throughout my career was to convince leadership higher ups that actually we could look at maintenance services as a added value, not simply just as an expense.
Yes.
Would for someone with the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that you have in an industry, how would you build a narrative for the higher ups, for leadership of the company to say, hey, it's worth investing in those guys. It's worth spending on their training, hire better qualified people, better build a structure, support structure. Because when you think about it, let's say for example, most companies will have maybe a regional maintenance director for 20 or 30 properties, while they're having 4 or 5 or 6 regional property managers. And to me, the ideal parity will be one-on-one. And it doesn't have to be a regional maintenance with a regional property manager, but some support person like a floater, a floating service tech. With the labor shortages that we have, you should have like one-on-one, ideally. So I like to hear your take on that. That'd be very interesting.
Folks like my friend Jennifer Suchokas, who you've spoken to before, is so smart. She's got a great recruiter. She's got folks focusing just on that role, right? Because it is such a hard role to fill and they make such a difference. One thing that we did back in my former life at Waterton is we had, everybody has a lot of surveys, but actually doing something with the information and the data that a survey gives you is where folks drop the ball. We surveyed a lot about the service team, about the service request, how it was completed, what the turn looked like when they moved in. And we made a lot of decisions based on that information. And we used it a lot in the budgeting process to say, okay, this person, if you can correlate satisfaction to income, gold mined, right? And there's a lot of good programs out there that allow you to do it. But what we tried to do is say, if this was right, if it was better, this is the time and money it would have saved us on the back end. Things like, we've all done it. And a refrigerator goes out and you don't have one. So you go take one from another apartment. So now you have to move 2 refrigerators. You know what I mean? So, it's just really, it's a rough way to get to an end goal there. The thing that I keep remembering is when I worked on site, we did this thing that we had a lot more preventative maintenance programs out there that not only trained and uplifted the maintenance team. We're like, okay, you're a porter now, but you're not going to be a porter forever. Let's go do preventative maintenance on air conditionings. Go and shadow somebody that's working on air conditionings and started identifying. We had one guy that was so good at fixing gates, we'd put him on a plane and fly him to a property to fix an access gate because it was cheaper than, hiring the gate fixing company, but they would do the preventative maintenance. And they would send one service person from every property to one property. This was back in my Trammell Crow days when I started. Let's say the property was Wood Green. Everybody in that market, we had a lot of properties in Atlanta where I am, would send one maintenance person to the property for the day. It was the property's responsibility to feed them. And that meant, biscuits with meat, sausage, chicken, whatever, and then lunch. And they would all tackle stuff on the property together, whether it's, AC filter replacement or they have a bunch of turns to get done. And it was great from camaraderie. I brought it up later in another company, like, well, who's going to pay for it? What if something happens? I'm like, we can manage to the what ifs all day long, but what it did was it let the leadership see, here's the folks that are really exceeding at their jobs. Here's some folks that we need to make room for, that we need to figure something out for, because if we don't, the gate company is going to come and hire them, right? So and we would make sure we had somebody from leadership at the property during lunch to meet them all, because they don't have that face-to-face. That's the other thing. Cindy Clare from Bell Partners, I saw her last week at a women in real estate event in New York City, and we were talking about feedback from the site teams, and she was telling me that she has these sit downs with Cindy where it's her, the property managers, service managers, the site teams, no regionals, no VPs of operations. She's the COO, and they have direct contact to her, and that is, the value in that. And she was kind of giving me that feedback. You eliminate that group that you don't want to say something in front of because they're your direct report. That's what this preventative maintenance schedule did for us. And it got stuff done at properties that were lacking. But the other part of that is, like, don't ever think that they don't want to be included in things like, trade shows and meetings. And I've sent service team members to leasing training because they're like, well, I want to understand what they're looking for, what they're doing, or, cross roles, let them follow a leasing consultant one morning, and then the afternoon, the leasing consultant follows them. I mean, things like that, simple, really simple, but brings so much value to the table, just making sure everybody understands what everybody else is doing. But yeah, that preventative maintenance thing, I've come back to that a lot in my life. And, I'm part of the Apartment All-Stars. I might start putting that back in my material. That was just, they'd leave the property. All these service team members would leave one property, and it just felt better, right? Because the property had all this attention put on it, and they got to have some fun, because those are lone workers, right? Maintenance, better than anybody. You're getting your tools, you're getting your supplies, you're going to a unit, you're doing your job, and then you're leaving. You're by yourself a lot. So to have an opportunity to have those other folks around you that you can learn from and get to see how hard you're working is super valuable.
Yeah, that's such a great, there's such a great piece of advice. And I do want to say, I think although our society evolves, our industry evolves for the better, right? It advances. There's so much value into the simple things and
Yes.
things that, the 101.
Yes.
101 of the industry, I don't think it changed really. And I think it really comes down to people, really. Like
Great.
Processes and everything revolves around people.
Agreed, 100%. And that site team has more of an impact on whether somebody's going to stay there or not than anybody else, because they're in their home. You're in your house. Think about that. That's crazy, right? So they're the ones that yes, you lease them and they know you and they come in the office and you may see them when you get a package or at the mailbox or at an event or something. But when you walk into somebody's house, it's pretty intimate, right? And then you're fixing things of theirs around their belongings. That I've had many of residents tell me before that I had one service manager, Mr. Thomas, one of the loves of my life, and they're like, Mr. Thomas ever leaves, I will move out that day, the day he leaves. That he was such a part of their life, and such a consistent person, and we're in their home. Let's not forget, I say that all the time. You had asked earlier about what is something that I try to impart at Entrada. I'm like, here's the difference between what we do and other technologies out there, or even the hotel business or short-term vacation stay, is people live here. They're contractually obligated to pay rent for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever it is. That changes the game, because if you get mad at Marriott, you just don't stay at Marriott anymore. All of a sudden you become a Hilton person. I'm done. I'm going to move over here to Hilton. And, but that doesn't happen with apartments. It's hard because they are contractually obligated. So if you have a service person that's more interactive with that resident on a more personal level, in their homes, helping them through problems, you can't measure their value. It's unmeasurable.
And it's so funny because I've been saying this for years. Like, I want for people to understand, you mentioned it's like intimate. When you think about a person that lives in an apartment, who visits, who enters their apartment?
The service team. Yeah.
Maybe family,
Yeah.
maybe close friends, maybe,
Yeah.
and a few people that are servicing. And the number one people that are servicing are the maintenance team on site. So imagine the level of trust that we gotta build right there.
Yes.
The importance of that interaction, right? Like that makes or breaks a relationship.
Everything. Yeah, you're right. And what's funny is that they only go inside their apartment when something's wrong. It's not like you're coming over your friend or family, you're coming over for dinner to watch the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
It's because something's broken.
Exactly. And
So,
you're
yeah.
there to make things better for them.
That's right.
And imagine if you don't deliver on that.
Oh gosh, all hell breaks loose. Yes, I know all too well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Virginia, I love the conversation. I know that we have a hard stop. I really hope that, to get you back here to do a second episode, because there's just so much more I wanted to talk about, but
Yeah.
the conversation got to an area, to many areas that I think, we're both passionate about. And I felt like you would have been ashamed for me not to go there. Right.
No, I think it's great. I really appreciate you having me, and couldn't be more proud of what you're doing in your new role. They're super damn lucky to have you, my friend. And I'd love to come back. That would be great. We can revisit and get back together. I love having this chat with you.
For sure. Any closing thoughts? Something that you really wish you would have said during the conversation, but you don't have the chance.
Yeah, the only thing I would say that the best thing I ever did for my career was get involved in the apartment association on a local level. That's the best thing. If I had to give every person on site a piece of advice, it would be to do that. It catapulted me into opportunities that I would not have had, into leadership. I was on the board in Atlanta. I led a big charity event we have, the Can Ball, for 13 years. I became chairperson. Back in the day, we called it president. I personally like president better, but now it's chairperson in Atlanta in 2011. I was chairperson of Georgia in 2018, right before I left to join Entrada. I've been on the board with, NMHC, NAA, all these groups. I got to tell you, and I would not have been able to do anything without that exposure. And to your point about I'm talking about the site teams, and we're talking about leasing and service. Those associations have so many opportunities for them. You don't have to wait to get to the national level. There's classes, there's committees, there's networking events. And again, it gave me the peer group that I have now. I've got 4 super close friends that I don't do anything. Jennifer, Sarah, Israel, and Josh. I don't make any decision without them. They're sort of like my personal board of directors. And I go to them first with whether I'm looking to make a change in my job, or I'm buying something, or trying to solve a problem, or I want to jump out of a window because it's been a hard day. Those are the people. And that's how I found those guys too. That's my biggest piece of advice these days, besides saying yes a lot and taking the demo, is to get involved. It's the best time you will spend, and you'll be able to really develop, take your personal development into your own hands. Don't wait for somebody else to train you. And that's what that opportunity will give you, a lot of good exposure.
I couldn't think of a better advice to wrap up this conversation with. Virginia, again, a million thanks for taking the time, for being here with me. Amazing conversation. And I hope to do another one, soon enough, because
I love it. Let me know.
There's so much more we need to cover.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Everybody, thank you very much for watching. This is Multifamily Chronicles. I'm your host, Adrian Danila, and I hope to see you back here soon. Have a great day.